Brenda Harris looked at him the way ambitious people look at anything that doesn't fit their timeline, quickly, cleanly, without apology. One sweep of her eyes across the café table told her everything she had already decided to know: the simple green corduroy shirt, slightly worn at the collar. The little girl settled against his side, curly-haired and solemn, pressing a soft white rabbit to her chest with both hands. The bunch of wildflowers sitting between them on the table, daisies and pink blooms, the kind you pick up from a corner stall, not a florist. Brenda sat back, arms folded across her blue dress, and let the conclusion settle in her chest like something solid and permanent. Not on my level. She didn't say it yet. But the thought was already furnished and lived in, the way a judgment feels when it has never once been wrong before. Across the table, Micheal Walter wasn't watching her. He was watching Donnie, tilting the rabbit's floppy ear back into place with the focused patience of a man who had learned that the smallest things matter most. He didn't look up. Didn't seem to notice the woman beside him who had already written his entire life in 3 seconds and filed it away. 72 hours later, Brenda would be staring at a bank statement with his name at the top and more zeros than she had ever processed in 5 years of high-stakes real estate. And the man in the green corduroy shirt would be the only person standing between her and the end of everything she had spent her career building. If you have ever looked across a room and decided, in one careless glance, that someone wasn't worth your time, this story is for you. It's about the price of a 3-second mistake. And how long it takes to pay it back. The rabbit hit the floor without a sound. One moment Donnie had it pressed against her chest, and the next it had slipped from her small fingers and landed, soft ears splayed, glassy eyes staring upward, directly beside the heel of Brenda's shoe. Brenda looked down at it the way she looked at most inconveniences, briefly, and with the faint curl of something that wasn't quite disgust but lived in the same neighborhood. She didn't move her foot. Didn't reach for it. Just let her gaze travel from the worn stuffed rabbit back up to her phone screen, reclaiming her attention as though the interruption had never happened. Cotton. Donnie slid off her father's knee with the urgency only a 4-year-old can manufacture for a fallen toy, curly hair bouncing as she crouched to retrieve it. She clutched the rabbit to her chin and looked up at Brenda with round, serious eyes, the kind of eyes that haven't yet learned to look away from people who make them feel small. Brenda didn't look back. It was Emmanuel Myers who laughed, low and indulgent, settling into the chair across from her. "Sweet little family," he said, with the tone of a man commenting on pleasant weather. Brenda reached for her coffee cup. She let a half-beat pass, just long enough to feel deliberate. "We are not on the same level, Emmanuel. I don't know why they seat walk-ins in this section." She said it quietly. Conversationally. The way people say things they have never once considered might land somewhere. But it landed. Micheal Walter didn't flinch. He didn't turn sharply or straighten in his chair or do any of the things that would have made it a moment. He simply looked up from Donnie, who was now reattaching herself to his side with cotton tucked firmly under one arm, and he looked at Brenda with an expression she would not fully understand until much later. It wasn't anger. It wasn't humiliation. It was something quieter and more unsettling than either of those things. The look of a man who has heard this particular song before, knows every word, and has simply stopped being surprised by who chooses to sing it. Tired clarity. That was all. Then he looked back down at his daughter, fixed the rabbit's ear again, and said nothing. The meeting ran 40 minutes over schedule, which Myers blamed on due diligence and Brenda blamed on Myers. She gathered her folders in the elevator afterward, reorganizing the same stack of papers 3 times because her hands needed something to do. The promotion conversation had gone well, or well enough. Myers had been warm, expansive, full of the kind of praise that feels like a handshake before a negotiation. She had learned, in 5 years of watching him work, that Emmanuel Myers was most generous with compliments right before he needed something. The elevator opened onto the 32nd floor and he stepped out with her, still talking. "There's going to be some internal movement in the next few weeks," he said, in the careful tone he used when information was being offered as a gift. "An audit. Full review of the firm's capital structure." He paused at her office door, adjusting his cufflink. "Silent partner. Been with the firm since before your time, never in the room, never on a masthead. Just, present. The way money is always present when it wants to be." Brenda set her folders on the desk. "What kind of numbers are we talking?" Myers smiled the way people smile when the answer is designed to impress. "The kind that make our biggest client look like a rounding error." He let that sit for a moment. "Millions. Plural and then some. He's been watching the firm's books from a distance for 2 years and now he wants a closer look." The smile held, but something behind it shifted almost imperceptibly, a tightening, like a man adjusting his grip. "Which means everyone performs. Everyone is visible. And everyone," he looked at her directly, "is on their best behavior." After he left, Brenda stood at her window and looked out at the city arranging itself below her in glass and light and motion. A silent partner. Invisible wealth. Millions attached to a name no one apparently said out loud. She thought, briefly and for no reason she could have explained, about the café. About a green corduroy shirt and a child with a stuffed rabbit and a man who had watched her with quiet, unhurried eyes. She dismissed the thought the same way she had dismissed him. Quickly. Cleanly. Without looking back. It was a Tuesday morning when she saw him before he saw her. She had been crossing the lobby with her coffee in one hand and a client brief in the other, moving at the pace of a woman whose calendar did not have margins, when she spotted him near the far bank of chairs. Micheal Walter. Green corduroy replaced today by a plain dark jacket that looked like it had been chosen for function rather than impression. He was standing slightly apart from the morning foot traffic, one hand in his pocket, phone pressed to his ear. Donnie was not with him. Without her, he looked different. Quieter somehow, and more still than the lobby around him deserved. Brenda's first thought arrived without invitation and installed itself comfortably: maintenance interview, probably. The building had been cycling through contractors for the past month. It would explain the plain jacket, the unhurried posture, the fact that he was simply standing rather than moving toward anything with purpose. She was already looking away when his voice reached her. "The secondary tranche needs to be restructured before Thursday." He said it without urgency, the way people speak when they are used to being listened to. "Move the liquidity buffer to the capital reserve account, not the operating fund, the reserve, and tell Chen I want the variance report on the Alderman portfolio cross-referenced with the Q3 projections before the audit window opens." Brenda stopped walking. She didn't mean to. Her feet made the decision independently, planting themselves against the marble floor while the rest of her caught up. She turned, slowly, with the careful nonchalance of someone pretending they aren't doing exactly what they're doing. Micheal had his back half turned to her, completely unbothered by the lobby filling around him, speaking with the flat precision of a man who had given instructions like these so many times that they had stopped feeling remarkable. Liquidity buffers. Capital reserves. Portfolio cross-references. The vocabulary of someone who did not simply know money but moved it, in quantities large enough to require a language most people never learned. Brenda looked at the plain dark jacket. She looked at the lobby chair she had mentally assigned him to. She kept walking. But slower now, and without the certainty she'd arrived with. She hadn't planned to go back to the café. That was what she told herself on the walk over, that it was proximity, convenience, the fact that the espresso there was genuinely better than anything the office machine produced. Not curiosity. Definitely not the unsettled feeling that had been living quietly in her chest since the lobby, rearranging small things without asking permission. She was on her second cup when Donnie appeared beside her table like a small, determined weather event. "Your hair is the same color as autumn," the little girl announced, with the confidence of someone delivering important news. Cotton was tucked under her arm, one ear freshly re-stitched with thread that didn't quite match. Donnie didn't seem to mind. Brenda looked up from her phone. Across the café, Micheal was already rising from his chair with the patient, unhurried energy of a man who had learned that 4-year-olds follow their own foreign policy. He caught Brenda's eye and offered a small, neutral nod, not warm, not cold. Simply acknowledging, the way you acknowledge someone when you remember exactly who they are and have decided to be gracious about it anyway. "She's fine," Brenda said, before she fully understood why she was saying it. Micheal settled back slowly. Watching, but not hovering. Donnie climbed, uninvited, onto the chair across from Brenda and arranged Cotton carefully on the table between them like a chaperone. "Do you have a little girl?" she asked. "No," Brenda said. Donnie considered this with great seriousness. "My dad talks to my mom sometimes. At night." She smoothed Cotton's ear with one finger. "He thinks I'm sleeping. But I hear him." She looked up, unbothered, the way children deliver devastating things. "Mama's in heaven. But he still tells her about my day so she doesn't miss anything." The café continued around them, cups clinking, conversations layering over each other, morning light pressing through the glass. Brenda felt something move through her that she didn't have an immediate word for. Not pity. Pity was comfortable and kept its distance. This was closer than that. She looked across the café at Micheal Walter, who was watching his daughter with an expression so unguarded she felt almost intrusive for witnessing it. A man who narrated his child's days to someone no longer there. She picked up her coffee cup. Set it down without drinking. The document was 43 pages long and Myers needed her signature by end of day. He presented it the way he presented everything he needed her not to examine too closely, inside a larger conversation, cushioned between compliments, slid across her desk with the casual confidence of a man who had learned that momentum was its own kind of pressure. "Project Alpha," he said, tapping the cover page. "The restructuring initiative we discussed. Your name on this as compliance officer is what moves us to the next phase." Brenda looked at the cover page. Then at Myers. "I haven't seen this before today." "You've seen the components." He settled into the chair across from her with the ease of someone who had already decided how this meeting ended. "The Alderman Portfolio Review, the Capital Reallocation Memo, the variance reports, this just formalizes your oversight role. It's a promotion document as much as anything else." He smiled. Your name needs to be on the things that matter, Brenda. That's how partnerships are built. She turned to page 6. The language was dense in the particular way that legal documents become dense when they are trying to describe something ordinary using words that aren't. Deficit absorption. Fiduciary continuity. Compliance indemnification. She read the same paragraph 3 times and each time it meant something slightly different and slightly worse. What is the actual deficit figure attached to this? She asked. Myers waved a hand. A working number. It shifts during audit periods. You know how restructuring cycles move. The point is that someone with authority needs to anchor the document while the silent partners team reviews the books. He looked at her steadily. That person should be you. Unless you'd prefer I find someone more comfortable with responsibility. There it was. Wrapped in silk, but there. Brenda looked back at the document. Page 31 had a number on it, not a working number. Not a shifting figure, a very specific, very large number with a name beside it and a signature line beneath it. Her name. Pre-typed. Already waiting. She thought about the lobby. About a voice she hadn't expected, speaking a language she recognized now with new unease. Tell Chen I want the variance report on the Alderman portfolio cross-referenced. The Alderman portfolio. The same name. Page 31. She did not pick up the pen. He texted her at 8:47 p.m. with an address and 4 words. Don't bring your phone. She almost didn't go. She stood in her apartment for 11 minutes, she counted, weighing the specific absurdity of meeting a man she barely knew in a park at night because he had sent a message that read like the opening of a cautionary tale. Then she thought about page 31. About her name, pre-typed and waiting. About Myers and his silk-wrapped ultimatums and the Alderman portfolio sitting at the intersection of 2 conversations that were never supposed to connect. She left her phone on the kitchen counter and took a cab. Michael was already there when she arrived, seated on a bench at the edge of the path where the lamplight reached but didn't insist. He was wearing a charcoal wool coat, open at the collar, and for a disorienting moment Brenda's mind searched for the green corduroy shirt the way you search for a landmark that has been removed. He looked the same and entirely different. The patience was still there, that particular stillness that she had initially mistaken for passivity and was only now beginning to understand was something closer to its opposite. He didn't stand when she approached. Just looked at her with those unhurried eyes and held out a file. She sat. She opened it. The first page was a wire transfer record. The second was an internal memo with Myers' signature at the bottom and a date 18 months prior. By the 5th page she had stopped breathing at her normal rate, because what she was holding was not an accusation, it was an architecture. A deliberate, documented construction of fraud built over 2 years, with Brenda's role designed into it from the beginning. Not a participant. A wall. Something to absorb the legal impact when the structure finally collapsed. How long have you known? She asked. Long enough, Michael said. I needed to be certain before I moved. She looked at him across the park bench, this man she had categorized in 3 seconds in a sunlit café, filed away under not my level and forgotten until the world kept returning him to her like an answer she hadn't known she needed. Why are you helping me? She asked. He looked at the path ahead. Because Donnie likes your hair, he said quietly. And because it's the right thing to do. She almost walked past them. It was the sound that stopped her, not crying exactly, but the small, effortful breathing of a child trying very hard not to fuss. Donnie was curled against Michael's chest in the building lobby, her face flushed and her curls damp at the edges, cotton pressed under her chin with both hands. Michael was on his phone, speaking in the measured tone of a man managing too many things at once, a prescription bag balanced on his knee and a look on his face that Brenda had not seen there before. Not the tired clarity. Not the patient stillness. Just a father, alone, slightly overwhelmed, doing the quiet mathematics of a person who has no one to hand things to. Brenda stopped walking. Later she would not be able to identify the exact moment the calculation shifted, when Donnie stopped being a detail in someone else's scene and became a child who needed help and was close enough to receive it. It wasn't dramatic. There was no internal monologue, no conscious dismantling of old conclusions. It was simpler than that, and more complete. She crossed the lobby. "What does she need?" Brenda asked. Michael looked up, and something moved briefly across his face. "Surprise, fever's been up since this morning. I have the medication but she won't take it." He glanced down at Donnie, who was regarding Brenda with glassy, half-interested eyes. "She's been asking for juice. The pharmacy didn't." "I'll get it," Brenda said. She was back in 7 minutes with apple juice and a soft pretzel from the cart on the corner because Donnie had mentioned once, in a café, with the authority of someone stating universal law, that pretzels fixed most things. She handed both to Michael without ceremony and crouched down to Donnie's level, really crouched, heels and dignity and professional distance abandoned entirely, and said, "Cotton looks like he's keeping watch." Donnie's mouth curved weakly. She corrected, barely above a whisper. Brenda said. "Of course." Michael was watching her. Not with the tired clarity of the café, not with the neutral acknowledgement of a man being gracious about an old insult. With something quieter and more careful than either, the look of someone revising a conclusion they had drawn about another person, and finding the revision unexpectedly worth making. Brenda didn't notice. She was too busy looking at Donnie. The Wall Street Journal alert came at 6:14 a.m. Brenda was already awake, sitting at her kitchen table with the Project Alpha file spread across one end and a cold cup of coffee at the other, when her tablet lit up with the notification. She almost ignored it. She had been ignoring most things that weren't directly related to Myers and the slow, careful work of building a countercase from Michael's documents. But the headline snagged something in her peripheral vision and she reached for the tablet before she had decided to. Reclusive venture capital founder surfaces amid firm audit. Walter Capital's Micheal Walter identified as silent backer behind 3 of Manhattan's largest real estate portfolios. She read it once. Then she set the tablet down, looked at the wall for a moment, and picked it up and read it again. The photograph was unmistakable. Not a posed shot, the journal had used something candid, taken at distance, the subject caught mid-stride outside a building she recognized as 2 blocks from her own office. Dark jacket, open at the collar. The same unhurried posture. The same face that had looked at her across a park bench 8 days ago and told her he was helping her because it was the right thing to do. Walter Capital. The firm's primary backer. The silent partner Myers had described with such careful reverence, the kind of money that makes our biggest client look like a rounding error, had a name she already knew, a daughter named Donnie, and a stuffed rabbit called Cotton that had once landed beside her shoe in a café while she decided, in 3 effortless seconds, that its owner wasn't worth her time. She thought about the corduroy shirt. The wildflowers on the table. The prescription bag balanced on his knee in the lobby. The way he had fixed the rabbit's ear with the focused patience of a man who understood that small things deserved care. She thought about her own voice, quiet and certain across a café table. We are not on the same level. The journal sat open in her hands, his name above a number with 9 digits in it, and Brenda Harris understood, fully, finally, without the comfortable distance of not quite knowing, exactly what kind of mistake she had made. It had cost her nothing but 3 careless seconds. The bill, it turned out, was considerably larger. Myers was escorted out on a Tuesday, which felt right somehow. Not a Monday, with its atmosphere of fresh starts and second chances. Tuesday, workmanlike, unsentimental, a day that simply got on with things. 2 men from the firm's legal team flanked him through the 32nd floor while the office held the particular silence of people who are pretending very hard to look at their screens. His cufflinks caught the light as he passed Brenda's office door. He didn't look in. She didn't step out. It was over in 4 minutes. 5 years of architecture, dismantled on a Tuesday morning before the second round of coffee. She found Micheal in the café 3 days later. He was at the same table, of course he was, with Donnie beside him working very seriously on a drawing that appeared to involve cotton in some kind of heroic scenario. He looked up when Brenda approached, and his expression did the thing it had been doing lately, settling into something warmer than neutral, though still careful, still measured. A man who had learned not to spend trust before it had been earned. Brenda stood at the edge of the table and did not reach for the polished language she used in boardrooms and client meetings. She had rehearsed something on the walk over and discarded it 2 blocks out because it had sounded, even in her own head, like a presentation rather than an apology. "I decided who you were before you had a chance to be anyone," she said. "And I was wrong. I was wrong about what I was looking at and wrong about what it meant, and I'm sorry, to you," and, she looked at Donnie, who had stopped drawing and was watching Brenda with round, serious eyes. "And to you, for what it's worth." Donnie considered this with great gravity. Then she held up her drawing. It was Brenda. Recognizable by the autumn-colored hair, standing next to a figure with a green shirt and a small curly-haired girl between them. Cotton featured prominently in the foreground. "I already put you in the picture," Donnie said simply, as though this settled the matter entirely. Micheal looked at Brenda across the table, no tired clarity, no careful distance, just a man deciding, quietly and without drama, that revision was possible. "Sit down, Brenda," he said. She did. She learned, in the end, that level had nothing to do with numbers. It had nothing to do with the cut of a shirt or the label on a shoe or the section of a café where a person happened to sit. Level, she understood now, was measured in quieter currencies, in the patience of a man who fixed a rabbit's ear in public without embarrassment, who narrated his daughter's days to a woman no longer there, who handed a stranger evidence that saved her career and asked for nothing in return. Brenda Harris had spent years building a life by looking at surfaces. It took 3 seconds to make her worst mistake and the better part of 3 months to understand what it had nearly cost her. Donnie still brought cotton everywhere. Micheal still wore simple shirts. And the most expensive lesson Brenda ever learned had arrived without a price tag, in a sunlit café, on an otherwise ordinary morning. She just hadn't known, at the time, to pay attention. Some people enter your life looking like nothing, and turn out to be everything. The real question was never about his level. It was always about hers. If this story moved you, stayed with you, or made you think twice about a snap judgment you've made, give it a like and share it with someone who needs to hear it today. And if you want more stories that get under your skin and stay there, subscribe so you never miss the next one. The best chapters are still ahead.